you are a forerunner in what God is doing in the new generation of leaders in the body of Christ, which is not about the money and the fame, because you gave up the money and the fame. I don't want to dig, but there's a big old narrative out there. Oh, they're multimillionaires. They work for this multi-million-dollar ministry. Has this affected you guys financially? Has it hurt your life financially?
I mean, as vice president of Daystar, I had a really hefty salary.
Just that year of 23, right? Or no, of 22. Is that when you got that big bump? Before that, we were always normal.
For 2023.
It was never,
I mean, it was still a nice.
But it was like massive in 2022.
Full-time vice president for a whole year.
We were shocked. We were like, whoa.
People want to act like you have this huge nest egg that they just put away for y'all, and you're just set
y'all
for
have
life.
like millions in the bank or something.
No.
But you could be forced to sell your house to get by at this point. It's not like you're just set up for life.
Right, exactly.
No, we're still paying a mortgage.
Yeah, still have the bills that are coming in from living a lifestyle that was with a larger set of income. I mean, both of us.
I had got a bump too in 22 because he became vice president. Before that, I was much less than the rest of the family.
Right.
When we got married, a few years in, we bought a $200,000 house. We lived in that house for 8 years. We had a very, very normal income. It wasn't big and it wasn't less, but it was very, very mediocre. Totally okay. For many years, I was making less than a Starbucks employee. And it was totally okay because I was mostly mom. And so it was fair. So it's not like we have some big nest egg or anything. That's why when everything actually came to head, when we got in 22 after he passed and I got a really nice salary and Jonathan too, you would think that would be the time to be tempted to stay, if anything. But that was the time we were more ready than ever. I mean, it was the wrestle and breaking of me begging God, when will Jonathan be ready? So I'm ready to sell this house. I'm ready for a new beginning. We have 50 states to choose from.
We lay everything on the altar for the truth. If we had simply gone along with the charade, put aside our convictions, read the card, praised my mom's marriage, and continued to not question anything about Pete, we would have had everything that my father had said I would be the next president after my mother either retired or passed away. That was in writing.
Welcome to today's video, where we unravel one of the most shocking revelations to emerge from the Lamb family and the Daystar ministry legacy. Joni Lamb's son, Jonathan, who many thought was destined to take over the family's multi-million-dollar empire, has made a decision that's left everyone stunned. Why would someone walk away from such an inheritance, a position of power and financial stability? Stay tuned as we break this down in detail. Before we dive into the story, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more eye-opening content and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We're eager to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so please share your opinions as we go. Daystar Television Network, founded by Joni Lamb and her late husband Marcus Lamb, stands as one of the largest Christian television networks in the world. From its humble beginnings in a small studio to the multi-million-dollar broadcasting powerhouse it is today, Daystar has reached millions of homes with its mix of worship services, interviews, and teaching programs. As a network, it not only amassed a significant fortune, but also cemented itself as a pillar of influence in the evangelical community. Growing up, Jonathan and his siblings watched their parents pour their lives into building this ministry from the ground up. Family photos displayed on the walls of the Daystar offices show a young Jonathan standing beside his father at groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, and missionary send-offs. From an early age, it seemed clear that Jonathan would one day carry on that torch. His father, Marcus, was often heard saying that Jonathan was being groomed to step into leadership once his mother decided to retire or when he felt called to hand over the reins. Marcus's belief in Jonathan's future role was no small matter. In staff meetings and special family gatherings, Marcus would speak of Jonathan's gift for administration, his compassion for people, and his unwavering commitment to the network's vision. Those close to the family recall Marcus joking, half in jest, half in earnest, that when Joni finally stepped down, Jonathan would be ready to serve as president of Daystar. That expectation weighed heavily on Jonathan. On one hand, the idea of leading the ministry to which his family had devoted their lives was both thrilling and humbling. On the other hand, it carried with it a level of public scrutiny and internal pressure few could imagine. To Jonathan, the ministry wasn't merely a job. It was his family's legacy, his father's dream, and a mission he believed in deeply. By 2022, Jonathan was serving as vice president of Daystar, a role that came with responsibilities ranging from overseeing programming to managing finances and donor relations. That year, he and his wife received substantial raises that elevated their lifestyle to levels they had scarcely dreamed of growing up. With 2 raises, in the spring and again in the fall, Jonathan's compensation package soared, allowing them to move into a larger home, enjoy more travel, and live with fewer financial worries. Yet even as the paycheck grew, so did Jonathan's unease. He began noticing things that didn't sit right with his conscience. He saw donors pressured, sometimes gently, sometimes aggressively, to give more than they could afford. He observed staff members torn between prayerful ministry and hitting fundraising milestones. He watched as ministry decisions prioritized budgets and ratings over genuine spiritual care. The most vivid illustration of this conflict came one afternoon in early 2023, during Daystar's semi-annual fundraising event known as Heart for the World. On that day, all hands were on deck. Every available cubicle in a massive open-plan office was filled with phones, red-hot earphones dangling over shoulders, and employees praying as they waited for the next call. Even those whose primary role was in production or marketing found themselves taking calls for donations. When Jonathan stepped into the call center, it was to check on staff morale, only to be stopped in his tracks by one particular conversation. An elderly woman had dialed in, her voice trembling with desperation. She explained that she had exhausted her savings and was in debt, yet still wanted to give the last bit she had on her credit card to the ministry. She'd heard on air that if she donated $1,000 that day, God would multiply it back to her $110,000. Jonathan watched as one of his colleagues rushed to take her information. When he finally reached the call, the woman's tears were impossible to ignore. Jonathan felt a surge of guilt and shame. He imagined her standing alone in her living room, clutching a rotary phone, willing to risk every last penny on a promise of miraculous return. In that moment, Jonathan realized that the very ministry he served was using faith as a currency. That encounter became a turning point. Jonathan couldn't reconcile this approach with his personal convictions or the biblical call to protect the vulnerable. Over the following weeks, he and his wife wrestled with sleepless nights and prayerful conversations. They recalled the teachings of Jesus about not teasing with a single speck in someone's eye while ignoring a plank in one's own. Matthew 7 verses 3-5. They reflected on the warnings about false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Matthew 7 verse 15. Slowly, Jonathan began to see his role not as a steward of a family legacy, but as a participant in a system that sometimes prioritized revenue over righteousness. His mother, Joni, remained deeply invested in Daystar's success, convinced that generous giving was an act of faith with God's blessing attached. But Jonathan now saw a line being crossed, one in which faith became a transactional promise rather than a gift. Deciding to leave wasn't easy. The family dynamic grew strained. Conversations around the dinner table, once warm and celebratory, turned tense as Jonathan's concerns became harder to ignore. Joni struggled to understand how her own son could turn against the ministry she and Marcus had poured their lives into building. Other family members and key leaders rallied behind Joni, affirming her leadership and urging Jonathan to stay the course. Ultimately, Jonathan realized that staying would require him to endorse practices he no longer believed in. He would have to stand by decisions that, in his heart, felt wrong. He would have to preside over a ministry that risked exploiting people's faith. And he would have to ignore the voice passing judgment in his conscience. So, he made the most difficult call of his life. In a meeting with close advisors, he resigned as vice president of Daystar. He relinquished the pay, the prestige, and the promises of a future presidency. He walked away from a comfortable home with his large mortgage, knowing full well that his wife and he would now face the financial realities of life on a modest income. They sold their house, paid off debts, and prepared to start over. For many, such a decision would be unthinkable. Jonathan and his wife were microscopic examples of millions of Christian families who struggle financially. Yet they chose to prioritize integrity over comfort, conviction over riches. They embraced uncertainty as a small price for spiritual peace. Leaving Daystar felt like shedding a second skin. Jonathan shared that the initial days were both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because he no longer had a guaranteed paycheck. Liberating because he no longer had to wrestle daily with the moral compromises he saw. Freed from the network's demands, he and his wife discovered new opportunities to serve in smaller, less conspicuous ministries. Places where transparency and genuine care were not slogans but daily practice. News of Jonathan's departure spread quickly through evangelical circles. Some praise him for his courage and integrity. Others criticize him for abandoning his family and the ministry during a pivotal time. Joni publicly expressed her disappointment, but also her love for her son, hoping in time they could reconcile and find a path forward. Today, Jonathan's story remains a lightning rod for discussion. It compels believers to ask whether they would make the same sacrifice for the sake of conscience. It challenges churchgoers to examine how giving is solicited and whether their own faith could be manipulated by charismatic appeals. And it forces ministry leaders everywhere to reckon with the question, how do we balance fundraising with protecting the vulnerable? What's next for Jonathan and his wife remains to be seen. They are exploring new ventures, writing, speaking, and consulting with smaller nonprofits that share their values. They speak regularly at conferences about the importance of integrity in ministry, using their story as a cautionary tale and an invitation to pursue holiness over wealth. This story is far from over. The Lamb family's legacy will continue, and Daystar will undoubtedly adapt and endure. But Jonathan's decision has already left an indelible mark, reminding the Christian community that the greatest inheritance may not be a fortune or a position of power, but clear conscience and a heart aligned with God's truth. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this remarkable journey. Do you think Jonathan made the right choice? Would you have had the courage to walk away? Share your views in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more in-depth explorations of faith, leadership, and the complex realities faced by ministries today. Thank you for watching, and may we all seek integrity and compassion in every area of our lives.